Welcome to Coyote's Corner. This episode we'll be listening to Michael Lang tell a true story, south of Duluth.
While working as a wilderness guide, I led many trips throughout the United States, from the waterways of Montana to northern Maine, down sections of the Mississippi River, and even up into parts of Canada. I met countless people along the way. Most of them I only knew for a few days, a week at the most, but every now and then, someone would stand out in the crowd, and a memory would linger for years to come. There were 2 other guides in the van with me that day, as we rambled along the western shore of Lake Superior, making our way north to where our group was waiting for a 3-day paddling trip. Somewhere south of Duluth, our boat trailer began to wobble and weave with a mind of its own, and by the time we had pulled over to the shoulder of the highway, not only had the right side trailer tire blown out, but it had managed to wrap itself around the rim in a molten mass of rubber. It took the 3 of us nearly 15 minutes to change the tire to our spare, but we needed a more permanent solution, so we set off, limping along the highway. We were in luck. A few miles away, there was a service garage, or a barn, rather. It was leaning to one side, like a tree that had been standing against prevailing winds for far too long, and the office attached to it was in a similar state. But the flag that hung over the door billowed in the gentle breeze and revealed the word open for all to see. So we pulled in and slowed to a halt. The lead guide looked to me. Pirate. That's what everyone called me in those days. I had cut off the ponytail I'd been growing through college, but it felt weird not having anything on the back of my neck, so I wore a long red bandana that gave me a sort of Johnny Depp look. Pirate. Go see if they can set us up with a replacement. I am legally blind, and have never been able to drive, so I never bothered to learn anything about cars or trucks or trailer tires. Well, what do I need to know? What am I asking for? Just ask them for a number 34 trailer tire. That's all I need? All right. I climbed down from the passenger seat and went into the office. There was a short and stout man standing behind the counter. He had a mop of long white hair and a mustache to match. As I walked through the doorway, he glanced up at me. Hey there, what can I do for you? I had to stop and think for a moment. Was it my imagination? Or had the Swedish chef from the Muppet Show just asked me what he could do me for? I smiled politely. Was wondering if you happen to have a number 34 trailer tire on hand. We had a blowout a few miles down the road, and we're in an awful hurry. Sure, you betcha. Come on in, see what you need. I was still translating the sure, you bet you, come on back and see what I got, when he waved in my direction and led the way towards an open back door. I stepped through the open doorway and saw what appeared to be the place where tires go to die. The small, muddy yard was surrounded by a chain-link fence. There were tires everywhere. Some were standing here and there, like racehorses that had been put out to pasture. Others were lying on their sides, worn out from a lifetime on the road. Some were buried in the mud, a foot already in the grave. The owner of the garage led the way through his vulcanized menagerie to a series of large metal cabinets. The door creaked and groaned as he slid it open, and within the cabinet I could see rows and rows of gleaming new tires. 34, let's see what we got here. He was pawing through all the tires. Here's a 34, no, that's 33. 33, here's a 33. He proudly produced the tire, bouncing it upon the ground as though to show it was properly inflated. It was indeed a beautiful number 33 trailer tire, but it was not a number 34. Actually, I was hoping that he had a number 34 by chance. Oh, sure, 34, that's what you're looking for. He tossed the tire over his shoulder, it crashed against the chain-link fence, and fell to the ground where it lay forgotten. In the meantime, he was already pawing through his stockpile of tires once more. 34. Oh, here's a 35. Lovely 35. Once more, he produced the tire and bounced it across the ground. No, I'm really looking for a 34. I don't know much about cars and trucks and trailer tires, but I do know that having tires that are different sizes is not a wise plan. He was pawing through his tires once more, tossing them this way and that. They fell discarded to the muddy ground, bounced against the chain-link fence. If you don't have one, that's okay. I'm sure there's another garage down the road. I'm sure they'll have something. I'm sorry for you to go through this much effort. Thank you so much for your time. I salvaged what I could of a graceful goodbye and turned away. The man was still muttering to himself and still throwing tires this way and that. In my imagination, I could hear that final trumpet blast of the Muppet Show theme song. I made my way back to the van and climbed into the passenger seat. So what's the deal, Pirate? Do they have one? I have no idea. And even if this man has one, I don't think we want it. Just drive. We'll find something further down the road. And sure enough, further down the road, we did find something else. A full-service garage in the heart of Duluth. They did have a number 34 trailer tire, and were more than happy to sell it to us. Soon enough, we were all set and on our way. We met up with our group just as planned, had a wonderful 3 days of paddling in northern Minnesota. Though the memories of that trip have faded over time, to this day I have still not forgotten the man who I met, somewhere south of Duluth.
That was Michael Lang telling South of Duluth. I'm sitting down with Michael now to get a little background on that story. Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely, Toby.
So at this point, we normally ask you where that story came from.
Right.
Well, you outlined that for us in the story. So rather than making you repeat that, why did you turn this event into a story?
I like telling this story because it has this extraordinary moment in it that is surrounded by real mundane life. And I think that is very effective for a true story.
How do you mean? Why does something so startling as meeting this Muppet on the side of the road have to be surrounded by boring mundanities?
I don't know if it has to be, but I find that if you were to just start telling someone a story about, hey, I met the Swedish chef, that's a little hard for people to jump in and listen to. But if you start with something more mundane that people can relate to, almost all of us have driven down a highway. If you drive enough, you're eventually going to have to change a tire. And so starting with something that the audience can very easily relate to, let them get a foot in the door, and then go into that more extraordinary side of the story. Now you've given people a chance to really be in the moment of the story and to just follow along wherever it leads.
So you're kind of giving them an entry point to the story so that they're fully enveloped in what's going on. They can picture themselves there, and then, bam, left hook from a Muppet.
Right. Sure, yeah. And it's not that it softens that. It actually makes it a little more extreme when suddenly this Muppet shows up out of nowhere. But at the same time, it gives a solid anchor for the listener to go back to of, no, we're still in the real world. This is still something that makes sense to me.
Okay. So the story centers around a pretty, I don't want to say startling, but an amusing, and it's kind of out there.
Right. It's not your typical meeting.
Yeah, to meet, Frank Oz embodied in a tire salesman. Do all true stories have to have that extraordinary nugget in the middle?
I don't think they do. There are a lot of storytellers who, when they're asked to tell a true story, will say, I don't really have one that's good enough. And I feel like we all have stories that are good enough. We just need to tell them the right way and to focus on that moment that makes the story unique and to use the normal life, the parts that might be considered boring, as the frame and the setting for that story, while a specific moment stands out as the real substance.
So it's kind of like, to take, Ulysses, James Joyce. It's a story of a guy walking around a city.
Right.
And it's a beloved classic. Beloved, reviled. People have different opinions on it. But it's an engaging story, though. But there's no central crazy event.
Right. And a story like that can be just as effective and have just as strong an impact because it has allowed the reader really to fall into that story and really travel along with the characters as the story unfolds.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michael.
Absolutely.
That was a very entertaining story and a very enlightening background to it. And thank you to our audience out there for tuning in to Coyote's Corner. If you want to hear more from Michael, check out his website at coyotesinc.com. That's the website for his small business, Coyote's Inkwell, where you can hire Mike to do local storytelling, educational, pure entertainment, can buy some CDs from him on the website or in person once you book him. You can see what organizations he's associated with, like the Seacoast Storytellers Guild, and see what other programs he's been on, including True Tales Radio at WSCA.
And as always, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe to the Coyote's Corner so you never miss anything of what we're doing here.
And until next time, this has been the Coyote's Corner.